Imagine you're standing in the middle of Rome. You're surrounded by ancient streets, enormous basilicas, and a city of nearly 3 million people. And somewhere right in the middle of all of it, smaller than a single neighborhood, there is a country. Not a city, not a district, a country. It is 109 acres of land. Smaller than Central Park in New York, smaller than Heathrow Airport in London. About 800 people live there permanently. It has no oil, no gold, no army worth speaking of, and produces almost nothing. By every standard measure, it should matter to no one. And yet, for nearly 2,000 years, kings have feared it. Emperors have kneeled before it. Wars have been fought and won and lost in its name. And right now, today, heads of state from every corner of the world travel to this 109-acre patch of land, just to sit in a room with one man. How does that happen? How does the world's smallest country become one of the most powerful institutions in human history? That's exactly what we're going to find out. And to do that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. 30 AD. Rome. The city is the center of everything. The Roman Empire stretched from the coasts of Britain to the deserts of North Africa. Rome doesn't just govern its territories, it defines them. Its roads, its laws, its armies reach everywhere. And somewhere in the east of this empire, in a province called Judea, a small religious movement begins. At first, it was tiny, dangerous even for those who follow it. Christianity, the belief that a man named Jesus of Nazareth was the Son of God, was crucified, and rose from the dead, is not tolerated by Rome. It is punished, sometimes by imprisonment, sometimes by death. Among its earliest followers is a man named Peter. He is, by tradition, considered one of the founding pillars of the Christian Church. And according to that same tradition, he eventually makes his way to Rome itself, right into the heart of the empire, trying to destroy everything he believed in. He is executed there, crucified upside down, reportedly at his own request, because he did not consider himself worthy of dying the same way as Jesus. His death does not end Christianity. If anything, it deepens it. His followers stay. They build. They mark the place of his burial. And slowly, quietly, Christianity keeps spreading through whispered conversations and hidden gatherings across the vast empire that is trying so hard to stop it. For 200 years, this continues. The movement grows, but stays on the margins, surviving persecution, drawing people in partly because it offers something Rome's official religions don't. The idea that every person, regardless of rank or wealth, matters equally. Then Rome does something no one expects. It changes sides. The year is 312 AD. A Roman general named Constantine is marching toward Rome to fight for control of the empire. The night before the decisive battle, at a place called Milvian Bridge, Constantine reportedly sees a vision. A cross. Above it, the words, "In this sign, conquer." He marks the symbol on his soldiers' shields and wins the battle. And from that moment on, Constantine does not forget where he believes his victory came from. A year later, in 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan. It grants religious freedom across the empire, and for the first time, Christianity is not just tolerated, but legally protected. Church leaders who had been hiding now operate openly. Christians who had been persecuted now move into public life. Constantine eventually converts himself, being baptized on his deathbed, and becomes the first Roman emperor to embrace Christianity. In a single generation, the faith that Rome spent 2 centuries trying to crush is now woven into Rome's political center. And that changes everything, because when a belief system becomes linked to political power, it also becomes tied to political survival. And Rome, the greatest empire in human history, is about to face something it cannot survive. The Western Roman Empire collapses. After centuries of expansion, it fractures under its own weight, pressured by migrations from the north and east, by economic strain, by an overextended military that can no longer hold every frontier at once. The last Western Roman emperor was a teenager named Romulus Augustulus. He is deposed without ceremony by Odoacer, a barbarian military commander who has effectively taken control of Rome's own armies. No great final battle, no dramatic last stand. He simply stops ruling, and the empire stops existing. For the first time in 500 years, there is no political center holding Europe together. But one institution survives the collapse completely intact: the Church. Think about what that means. Every political structure, every administrative system, every military chain of command that Rome built, gone overnight. But the Church, with its bishops in every city, its priests in every town, its shared doctrine connecting millions of people across thousands of miles, it just keeps going. In a world where every other system of authority has just disintegrated, the Church is the only thing left that still works. And that makes it suddenly more powerful than it has ever been. The centuries that follow are messy. Europe fractures into kingdoms. Former Roman territory was carved up by Frankish kings, Visigoth chieftains, and Lombard warlords. Each of them controls land. Each of them commands armies. But none of them inherits the thing that made Rome truly powerful, the automatic legitimacy that comes with being a recognized, established authority. Force can take a throne, but it cannot make people accept one. That is where the Church steps in. In this new world, the Church is the only institution that still has structure, continuity, and trust that crosses borders. It has bishops in every kingdom, scholars who are the most educated people on the continent, and crucially, it claims to speak with the authority of God Himself. If a king is blessed by the Church, his claim to the throne becomes much harder to challenge. If he is opposed by the Church, even his most loyal allies begin to ask uncomfortable questions. Slowly, a new rule takes hold. Kings may rule land, but only the Church can grant legitimacy. And on Christmas Day, 800 AD, that rule is made visible in the most dramatic way possible. St. Peter's Basilica, Rome, December 25th, 800 AD. A Frankish king named Charlemagne kneels in prayer. He has already conquered most of Western Europe. He is, by any practical measure, the most powerful man on the continent. But he is not yet an emperor. As he kneels, Pope Leo III walks toward him and places a crown on his head. The crowd calls out, "Long life and victory to Charles Augustus, crowned great and peace-giving emperor of the Romans." In that single moment, the most powerful king in Europe receives his highest title, not from his army, not from his victories, not from bloodline, but from the leader of the Church. The message lands across Europe like a thunderclap. Political authority now flows through religious authority. And a new question begins to form beneath the surface of everything that follows. If the Church can make an emperor, can it also unmake one? The answer comes about 250 years later, and it is spectacular. By the mid-11th century, the balance between kings and the Church had become dangerously unstable. Kings are appointing their own bishops, placing loyal men inside church positions to control land, tax revenue, and local loyalty. The Church objects strongly. Bishops are supposed to be appointed by the Pope, not by kings. This dispute over who has the right to appoint church officials inside a kingdom is called the investiture controversy, and it produces one of the most remarkable scenes in European history. January 1077, a castle at Canossa in northern Italy. Pope Gregory VII is sheltering there during a bitter political crisis. He has excommunicated the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry IV, stripped him of his religious legitimacy, the very thing that holds his rule together. And it is working. Henry's own nobles are beginning to question whether they owe him any loyalty at all. So Henry IV, the most powerful political ruler in Europe, does something no one expects. He walks to Canossa, barefoot, dressed in sackcloth, the rough clothing of a sinner seeking forgiveness. In January, in the Alps, he stands outside the castle gate for 3 days in the snow, waiting. Pope Gregory VII makes him wait, and on the 4th day he receives him and lifts the excommunication. Henry gets his legitimacy back, but everyone watching understands exactly what just happened. The most powerful political ruler in Europe just stood in the snow for 3 days, begging a religious leader to forgive him. The church had proved it could bring an emperor to his knees, without a single soldier. The investiture controversy was eventually settled by the Concordat of Worms in 1122, a treaty that created a compromise between popes and emperors over church appointments. But Canossa is never really forgotten. It is the moment the power of the papacy becomes impossible to deny. In 1095, that power reached its most extraordinary expression. Pope Urban II stands before a vast crowd at Clermont in France and calls for a military expedition to the Holy Land, to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim rule, to defend Christians in the East. He calls it a sacred duty. And kings listen. The First Crusade, launched by the words of a religious leader, drew armies from across Europe. They marched thousands of miles across treacherous terrain. And in 1099, they take Jerusalem. The Pope did not have the largest army. He did not have the most land. But he had something that no army or land can buy: the ability to make men believe that dying in his cause was worth it. That is the peak of medieval papal power. A church that can start wars with words alone. But power at its peak is also when cracks begin to form. Over the centuries, the church had been accumulating not just spiritual authority, but actual physical territory. Through donations, political agreements, and conquest, the popes had come to rule a broad strip of land across central Italy, the Papal States, governing cities, collecting taxes, and commanding soldiers. The Pope was now not just a spiritual leader. He was also a king. And kings make enemies. Over the following centuries, the relationship between European monarchies and the Church grew increasingly complicated. Then, in 1517, a monk in Germany did something that fractured Christian Europe permanently. On October 31, 1517, Martin Luther sent a document to the Archbishop of Mainz listing 95 arguments called theses against church practices he considered corrupt. Chief among them, the selling of indulgences, the idea that you could pay money to reduce time in purgatory. Luther doesn't intend to start a revolution. He is a theologian trying to start a debate. But what he started was the Protestant Reformation, the single biggest rupture in the history of Western Christianity. Within decades, large parts of Europe, Germany, England, Scandinavia, and the Netherlands broke away from the authority of the Pope entirely. The church that had unified Christian Europe for 1,000 years now governs only part of it. The Pope's political grip on the continent is broken, but he still has his land. And for 3 more centuries, the Papal States survived, a physical kingdom in central Italy ruled by a religious leader. Italy in the mid-19th century was not a single country. It is a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and foreign-controlled territories. A movement to unify them, the Risorgimento, has been building for decades. And the Papal States sit right in the middle of it. On September 20, 1870, Italian forces breached the walls of Rome at a gate called Porta Pia. The soldiers of Pope Pius IX offer only token resistance. The Pope has already instructed them not to fight. Within hours, Rome falls. After more than 1,000 years, the Church loses its physical kingdom. Pope Pius IX refuses to accept it. He retreats inside the walls of the Vatican and declares himself a prisoner. He will not cross into Italian-controlled Rome. He forbids Italian Catholics from participating in the new Italian state's politics. His successors follow his example. For nearly 60 years, the Pope has stayed inside the Vatican, refusing to acknowledge that anything has changed, even as the world outside keeps moving. The standoff finally ended on February 11, 1929. Benito Mussolini is not a religious man. He is a fascist dictator who has just consolidated power over Italy. But he is practical, and he can see that the 60-year standoff between the Italian state and the Catholic Church is a source of instability he cannot afford. So he makes a deal. The Lateran Treaty was signed between Mussolini's government and Cardinal Pietro Gasparri, representing Pope Pius XII. In it, Italy formally recognizes Vatican City as a fully independent sovereign state, 109 acres, its own laws, its own passports, its own government. The Pope formally recognizes the Italian state in return, and Italy pays the Vatican a substantial financial settlement for the territory lost in 1870. In one day, a 60-year hostage standoff becomes an internationally recognized country. It is one of the strangest transactions in modern political history. A dictatorship creates a nation to end a religious dispute, and the nation it creates has no army worth mentioning, no natural resources, and almost no exports. Just 109 acres and one man. And yet, today, the Vatican has full diplomatic relations with 183 countries. The Pope is received as a head of state everywhere he travels. When he speaks on war, poverty, climate, or human rights, it makes international news, not because he has an army behind his words, but because over 1 billion people listen to him. There are approximately 1.4 billion Catholics in the world. That is about 17% of the entire global population. The Catholic Church runs the largest non-governmental network of schools and hospitals on earth. Its presence in daily life, births, marriages, deaths, education, and healthcare is unmatched by any NGO or international body. And its influence has shaped history well into the modern era. When Pope John Paul II, a Polish pope elected in 1978, began supporting the Solidarity movement in communist Poland, he helped ignite a chain of events that contributed to the fall of the Soviet Union. Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev both later acknowledged his role in the events of the 1980s. A man with 109 acres, whose country had no army and no nuclear weapons, helped bring down a superpower. So how does the world's smallest country hold the most power? Not through armies, not through land, not through natural resources, economic output, or military threat. Through something far older and far more durable than any of those things. Belief. The Vatican's power has always rested on the same foundation it rested on in the year 30 AD, when a small group of people in Rome refused to stop meeting even after their leader was executed. The belief that this institution speaks with an authority that goes beyond any individual king, any individual empire, any individual century. Every time a king sought papal blessing, he reinforced that belief. Every time a pope excommunicated a ruler and made it stick, he reinforced it further. Every time a crusade was launched, a treaty was blessed, a conflict was arbitrated. The belief compounded. Empires come and go. Rome fell. The Mongols rose and vanished. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. The British Empire retreated. The Soviet Union dissolved. The Vatican is still here. Not because it is powerful in any conventional sense, but because it understood, earlier than almost anyone, that the most powerful thing in the world is not a sword or an army or a treasury. It's the thing people are willing to kneel for. And that's the answer to the question we started with. The world's smallest country became one of history's most powerful institutions, not by controlling the most land or commanding the largest armies, but by shaping what people believed for nearly 2,000 years. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.